welcome back to our podcast, A Couple of Silmarils, where we go through the Silmarillion for the first time and kind of just talk about it and rehash the chapters. Last week we did chapter 1 and 2 of the Silmarillion, where we kind of talked about the beginning of Arda and the creation of the dwarves. And now we are going into chapters 3, 4, and 5. And these chapters are called Of the Coming of the Elves, and the Captivity of Melkor, of Thingol and Melian, and the last one of Eldamar. We are going through 3 chapters-ish at a time, and that's because the chapters are actually pretty short. Especially chapter 4 is like 1.5 pages. So we talked about that a little bit, that the chapters are kind of short. We think it's partially because of Tolkien actually never finished this book. So some of them we wonder if he was going to add more to later. But anyways.
And I think what you're trying to do, maybe 15 to 17 pages seems to be the sweet spot for timing. So whatever that equates to in terms of the chapters.
Yeah, that's kind of our goal. So we're going to start in chapter 3, which is called Of the Coming of the Elves and the Captivity of Melkor. So this is exciting that we finally get to learn how the children of Iluvatar came about, and also Melkor gets to be captivated. What's the word? Captured. That's exciting too. So, anyways, Middle Earth has remained under the influence of Melkor, and the Valar are safe in Aman, and they are kind of doing their own things. However, especially Yavanna and Orome, they're the Valar that are most frequent in Middle Earth, and they're pleading the Valar, let's attack Melkor, let's capture him, or kill him, probably is what they would love to do, before the elves come. But the rest of the Valar do not agree with that, and go ahead.
I was just going to say, particularly the children of Iluvatar, before they come, is
the children of Iluvatar. So essentially the Valar are waiting for them to come. They realize that Iluvatar has said they'll come under the stars, and so they ask Varda, the creator of the stars, to make the stars in Middle Earth brighter, essentially. And when she does that, the elves do awaken by the Quivenian and behold the first light of the stars. What is Quivenian? Do you remember?
It's their place where they live. The first start of the children of Iluvatar. Is it supposed to mean something specific?
No, I was just wondering if you had anything else on Quivenian. It's right by a great lake.
It's unfortunately a little bit close to Atumno,
Melkor's
fortress.
Close.
It's like, of all the land you have in Middle Earth that's uninhabited, they are decently close to Atumno.
Yeah. So the Valar, I think it's interesting. Iluvatar doesn't say, "Hey, the elves are here." Orome is actually roaming around Middle Earth, and he hears their singing, and that's when they are first discovered by the Valar. Melkor has already discovered them, and he's kind of corrupting them. And he's already taken some and captured some of them, and so he's already aware that they're here. Anything about Orome?
I did find that was interesting, how there was no big announcement. The children of Iluvatar are here, because the Valar seem to be, they've retreated to Aman. They've made it very beautiful. It's a very great place for them. They kind of seem to be in snooze mode. And then Orome and Yavanna are the only ones going to Middle Earth, and they really plead with them, guys. I think the children of Iluvatar are coming very soon. And so they're trying to get them to focus on, don't forget our mission here is to build this for the children of Iluvatar, not to just build this for ourselves, the Valar. And so I did find it interesting. There's no great announcement like, hey, they're here. Orome is just going through the woods, and he hears them all singing and whatnot. And I mean, this could have been, once again, they really don't have time in Middle Earth yet. I mean, this could have been thousands of years. I don't know.
Yeah.
That they're kind of there by themselves, if you will, and they learn how to sing and learn language. All these things are explained, and Orome kind of doesn't find them until they're already singing together as a group, and he's quite enthralled by them.
Yeah, and the the elves, they are actually afraid of him, and that's partially due to Melkor because he has made them afraid of the Valar, and he has a lot of spies that he has within the elves, and so they're actually a little bit afraid of Orome. But he he approaches them, and they do discover that he is safe and he's good. So, so now the elves are here, and Orome brings this news back to the Valar. And this is when the Valar finally agree to capture Melkor because they're like, oh, we don't want him corrupting the elves, although he already is. I did want to mention that he brings some of the elves back to, he as in Melkor, brings some of the elves back to Tumno, his fortress, and he does start corrupting them, and they become the first orcs. So that is mentioned in that section of the chapter.
I thought that was interesting too. So their first experience with a greater power is actually Melkor, the elves, and the elves call themselves the Quendi. So the Quendi's first experience is with Melkor. Melkor kind of has spirits going throughout the world, kind of a whisper campaign against the Valar. It kind of seems like beware of the rider on the horse who is Orome. But they are saying that whenever the elves wander too far away from Quibenian or alone, particularly, they just disappear, and the elves don't know what happened to it. So there's quite a fear of the forest around them and whatnot that the Quendi, the elves have here.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, they decide to create a siege against Melkor. The book explains it as terrible, and part of the land was changed and damaged and reshaped because of the siege. In the end, Melkor was wrestled to the ground by
Tulkas.
Tulkas, the strong, or lots of passion, and he was bound in chains, and he was taken to Valar. So he's not completely destroyed, but he was imprisoned, essentially. So he's taken back to the Valar. They put him in the halls of Mandos, and it just says he is there for 3 ages. And the Valar did not discover, so they found Melkor, but they didn't discover all of the evil creatures very far below in Autumno and the other, what's the Angband, yeah, the other fortress of Melkor, and that's where Sauron abides, and they did not discover Sauron.
They did not find Sauron. And just a kind of a note on Angband, essentially, there's a quick overview of this chapter of the Valar living in peace in Aman, and Melkor pretty much having free reign over Middle-earth. And so he builds this whole nother fortress and gives it to his lieutenant Sauron. He creates all these weird dark creatures. The Balrogs are given power to it during that time. And so he really has free reign over the earth, other than Orome and Yavanna every once in a while stopping by. But anyway, there's lots changed since the Valar have left, and that includes Angband, which they do destroy. Yeah. And I just, real quick note, I find it interesting that Melkor is chained. They give the chain a name that Aule made. Eingainor is the chain that Aule made to get Melkor and keep him there.
Yeah, it had to be pretty powerful, so it makes sense that it was also named. Yeah, so the book mentions evil is lessened, but it is not, but it still remains in Middle-earth. So that's kind of where Middle-earth is right now. The elves are there. So the Valar meet in council again, and this time they're deciding what they should do with the elves. Some of them really want the company of the elves and to teach them their ways and show them where they live. So in the end, they do decide to ask the elves to come to Valinor. And some of the Valar do not agree with them. They said much grief would arise as they brought the elves to Valinor.
I just found that council, it was interesting. Even Umu comes. Umu doesn't come to a lot of councils. He likes to do his own thing, but that one was a big enough deal that he came over. So essentially, they've defeated Melkor. They said, the book says, Sauron escapes, and there's several different deep dark caves in these fortresses, Atumo and Angband, that the Valar don't find everything. So some of this evil is still on the earth, but in general, it's a time for the Quendi, the elves, to expand and to have the land to themselves. But the Valar are concerned that Melkor's influence is still over there, and they're like, we don't know how to fully help them without them coming over to Aman, to the lands of the Valar.
They do decide to bring the elves over. The elves, however, they have seen nothing of the Valar save their aggression towards Melkor, and they were really reluctant to heed this summons. They were wary of it, and so Orome invited 3 ambassadors, Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë, to come to him to Valinor. Essentially, they were the leaders of the different hosts of elves, which I'll mention in a second. And this really helped because they go to Valinor, they're like, wow, they're enamored by the light of the trees. And so they come back to the elves and they convince them, hey, we really should go. This is a pretty cool place. So I was going to stop there and talk about the 3 hosts of the elves because we mentioned Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë. So there are 3 different hosts of elves that are going to make their way over to Valinor. The first host is Vanyar. Do you want to speak on the Vanyar? Do you have any?
Well, yeah, we could say a little bit on them. The Vanyar are, and we learn these chapters here. It seems like a very crucial to the world building that goes beyond here for the Silmarillion. So the Vanyar, Elwë is Ingwe is the king of the Vanyar. They are the smallest faction of elves, and they end up becoming. The book does not say the most holy. But they are the fairest, and they end up being the most in love with the land of Valinor, the most in communion with the Valar. So they really end up really taking that on. And it's said that even that mankind later on very rarely talks with the race of the Vanyar, just because they are so aloof is probably not the word they were used, but they are so set apart in terms of their, I don't know if spirituality and holiness is the right way to put it, but in terms of kind of where their direction in Middle Earth is.
And because of this, Manwë and Varda, their most beloved, that's the most beloved host of elves, are the Vanyar by Manwë and Varda, because Manwë and Varda can relate to them the most in terms of their the way they think and their love of Valinor and things like that. So
and Ingwe actually ends up living in Tanaquetil, or at the foot of Tanaquetil, as close to Manwë and Varda as anyone else gets to. And Ingwe ends up being considered as like the most noblest of elves. He's like one of the highest names of elves. Apparently, that will continue going on. So that's a name we should try to remember as we go on.
The second host is the Noldor, led by Finwë.
Yes, the Noldor. Aule really likes the Noldor. They apparently are they like crafting, they like mining, things of that nature. They're the deep elves. We are given in the end of this chapter and the end of this section that the rest of the Silmarillion is probably going to be following the Noldor. If I read that paragraph correctly, it seems like they go into a lot of depths of their lineage, and so we need to get to know the Noldor and the names of the Noldor. It's going to be very important. So, I think we have more to come on the Noldor, but they are very crafty, and Aule really likes them.
So the last and final and the largest host of elves are called the Teleri.
The Teleri, they are led by Elwë, and they're they are definitely the largest faction of elves. And this whole chapter, this whole section here is about the elves leaving Middle Earth and then going to Aman. And so there's a great journey that takes place, as Addie will say more on. But the Teleri, since they're so large, end up having a couple leaders. They end up creating several factions among them and separate. Their journey is the largest, or is the longest, it seems.
Or the most confusing.
Several different points on that one. And they end up, I'm very interested to see where Tolkien goes. I assume they end up becoming several of the elves of Middle Earth that we interact with later. And I guess the Noldor as well, I assume. But anyway, there's the Teleri, there's a lot to say on them.
Yeah, they have two lords, actually, Elwë and his brother Olwë.
Yes, that's
as well.
correct.
And probably because they're just so large that they need two lords.
Yeah.
So these hosts of elves, all 3 of them, they start journeying towards Valinor, and this was a very long and tedious journey, and the book does go into it quite a bit. And so a lot of the elves remain fearful and reluctant. And on occasion, Orome would have to leave them, and so when Orome would leave, they would stop. They wouldn't keep going. So they're pretty fearful of the journey. So eventually, they make it to the Anduin. It wasn't called the Anduin at that time, and the Misty Mountains. At this point, the Misty Mountains were pretty terrifying because Melkor had raised them to a pretty high height. So this is where they stop. And did you have anything? Because I kind of the journey. There's a lot more explanation of this journey, but I kind of went a broad overview of that. So right now they're at the Misty Mountains. Did you have anything to add to that?
Not a whole lot. It's just we're trying to look at maps and follow this journey, and it's a little bit difficult to follow to an extent. A lot of these places get renamed later in Lord of the Rings, or are not really key things, or maybe we'll learn about them later in the Silmarillion. But yeah, essentially, it seemed one of the interesting things they say here is that a lot of the elves they were very excited by the journey. They liked, but they were a little scared of the destination. So they would, particularly the Teleri, would kind of travel behind the other elves. And when Olme would leave, yeah, they would. Orome, thank you. When Orome would leave, they would just wait for a couple years till he came back before they would start a journey again. This was quite the ordeal.
Yeah, and it was many, many years. I feel like when I'm explaining this or when I was writing this down, I'm like, and eventually they made it here. There is a huge gap in that eventually. There's many years there. So
without time being tracked quite yet in Silmarillion, it's very hard to tell.
Yeah, I think time was tracked with the trees. There is a concept of time, but things last forever.
Definitely not years yet.
Yeah. So at this point, this is when the Teleri definitely become separated from the Noldor and the Vanyar. Though the Noldor and the Vanyar are just more eager to get to Valinor, and the Teleri are just not as eager. And this is a point where one of the Teleri, Linwë, forsakes the march, and he leads away quite a big group of people, and they go southward towards the Great River. So we don't really know much more in these chapters of where they are.
And they end up getting called the Nandor.
Yeah, they're eventually called the Nandor. So that's kind of where they leave them at this point. The Vanyar and the Noldor make it all the way to the Great Sea. I'm assuming that's the coast. There
it is, yes.
But they become fearful again, and they.
This is the first time they've seen an ocean. Like, this has to be quite.
That's a good
sight.
point. That's a very good point. How are we going to cross this? They have never seen a boat. They don't know what that would entail. So they withdraw into the highlands and the woods of Beleriand, and this is when Orome leaves them and goes back to seek counsel to Manwë as well. So like we said, when Orome leaves, they're like, we're not going anywhere. So at this point, that is kind of where they are. Beleriand is part of Middle Earth, but it's not on the current Middle Earth maps because it at one point it does get destroyed. And so if you're not familiar with
that's
Beleriand,
a spoiler alert, I think, for Silmarillion.
Yeah. So that's why if you haven't heard of it, that means that's why. Okay. So
but it's all west of the Shire, northwest of the Shire is where this land is. So to kind of help you picture, it's like the Blue Mountains are west of the Shire, and this goes even farther. So this whole land is just the area by the sea. And real quick, I wanted to say on the Nandor, my hypothesis is that they end up becoming the Wood Elves, because trying to look what south of the Shire, southeast, ends up being Mirkwood, and so we don't know that, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, keep that in your head and see if they come back.
Yeah.
So Elwë is the leader of the Teleri. They're behind Nandor and the Vanyar, and they have not made it to the coast or the Great Sea yet. He eventually does convince most of the elves that didn't follow Linwë to move past the Misty Mountains. And after many, many, many years, they finally make it to Beleriand, and there they halt and they dwell at a place called the River Gelion. And so that's kind of where chapter 3 ends. It's super interesting to know more about that, the beginning of the elves. and how they're making it slowly, but surely to the Valinor. And so that leads us into the 4th chapter, which is a very short chapter. It's just 1.5 pages, and it's about a relationship between a Maya and an elf. Did you have anything about chapter 3 you wanted to add on before we?
Yeah, I have. I guess
on?
a couple naming conventions that we'll try to get correct, but they call these elves as they break apart from each other the Sundering, and so as elves, the elves are all around Quevian initially, and some of them take the call to go to Aman, to the land of the Valar, to Valinor, and some of them stay. So anyone that starts that journey is part of the Eldar, and you'll see that in you'll hear that in Lord of the Rings, and in other Tolkien literature and shows like that. The Eldar, anyone that's left to start that journey, is called the Eldar. There are some elves that decided we are not leaving Quevian, and those are called the Avari. They're unwilling to leave. So the Avari and the Eldar are the 2 factions of elves initially. Within the Eldar, you have the 3 that you mentioned. And then as they go on, there are some of the Teleri that just stay behind. And so they end up calling them
branch off.
The Umanyar. Umanya are the elves of darkness. So those are the Alvari and the Eldar that stopped the journey. And together, those are called. I'm sorry, that's not true. The Umanyar and the Avari together are called the Moriquendi, the elves of darkness. So the Moriquendi, it's a lot of names here.
Got this.
But so if the Moriquendi are basically people that did not make it over to Valinor or stopped on this. So the Avari did not even start the journey. The Umanya started the journey and then stopped and decided to settle somewhere else. And so those are the elves of darkness, the Moriquendi. So anyway, there are even more sunderings, as Tolkien calls them, and many sunderings as we continue to go on.
Real quick, the sunderings are the ones that are part of that's Eldar, or the sunderings?
The sundering is a name for division.
Okay. So the sundering of the elves.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
that makes sense.
So the first sundering was the Alvari and the Eldar, and then the Eldar continued to sunder.
Yeah. So many different factions come from their travel across Middle Earth, which is really interesting to think about that, like how different races are, started because they're moving around so much. People want to stay.
Well, yeah, essentially you have a whole continent that's uninhabited other than this one area. As people move across that, they're like, look at all this land. It just reminds me of a Great Expanse in America or whatnot, too, where they see just all this land, and they have all of these ideas for it. So the elves are moving across, and they just see, what is this? This looks great. Let's try this. This is exciting. And so they're discovering all these new things. Like, why do we need to go to Valinor when we just see all this wonderful things already?
Yep. Yeah. So that takes us to chapter 4, really short chapter. It starts out talking about Melian. Melian is a Maya, which is the female of a Maiar. The Maiar are the kind of like servants of the Ainur. Some of them are still with the Iluvatar, some of them are with the Valar. And so Melian actually dwells in the gardens of Lorien, and it says specifically that there were none more beautiful, more wise, or more skilled in the songs of enchantment. So she was a singer, big singer, and enchanter. When the elves awoke at Quevienen, she left Valinor and filled the silence of Middle-earth with her songs and the voice of the birds. So the birds are singing, and she is also singing. So I'm assuming a lot of the singing that the elves first heard were from Melian. And so when the Teleri's journey was almost at the end, they were resting along the River Gellion, kind of where we left off in chapter 3. Elwë, who is the lord of the Teleri, that's the largest host of the elves, he wants to go and visit his friend Finwë, and he is the lord of the Noldor, the other host of elves. So he travels through the woods to go visit his friend, and while he's in the woods, he starts hearing a song of nightingales, and it's really beautiful. And this is when he first hears the voice of Melian, and it fills his heart with wonder and desire. He forgets everything that ever existed. All of his people, Middle Earth, everything, and he's just in search for whoever is singing this song. And so he keeps going deeper and deeper into the woods. He gets lost eventually, but he does find Melian. She's in a glade below the stars. And once he finds her, he takes her hand, and a spell was laid on him so that they stood in the glade for many years before they even spoke a word. So can you imagine feeding me and just staring into my eyes for years before even speaking a word? She must have been very beautiful. Anything on that?
It's kind of
Their meeting?
it's kind of a cute but kind of a very creepy story too, where it does say she puts him under he's under a spell. I don't know if it says she puts him under the spell, but he is spellbound by her, and so essentially he just forgets all his people, all his friend Finwë. He forgets everything, and just goes and is this hermit, essentially. Well, not her, but just goes and lives with her,
Yeah.
and just sits there. I think they hold hands and just stare off into the night.
I bet she's singing.
And that's yeah.
Yeah, so that's once again when we it's probably many, many years that they're just standing staring at each other. Yeah, and the creepiness is that he's under enchantment. So it's like if this is not his own free will that he's falling in love with her. It's weird. But the Teleri could not find him. He's lost. I wonder what they thought, that he had died somewhere or something.
And that's interesting because they there's more talking about this later, but they don't really have a drawn out concept of death. Um, the people the people that Melkor took, I don't think they've ever seen them die. They just they just disappear. They like avoid the darkness. So this plays in later when it's like it seems to be thousands of years later, or at least hundreds of years later, and there's a group that's like we still want to search for Elwë. It's like, give it a rest already.
Yeah.
But that's not quite their mindset because they're not used to people.
They think he'll show up again, and he does. So that's, give them the benefit of the doubt there. So because they couldn't find him, his brother Olwe becomes the leader of all the Teleri, and they do eventually depart to go to Valinor. But Melian and Elwë never make it because of their love of each other. And there's other reasons why, and we'll mention that later. So Elwë, when he comes back, he starts being known as Elu Thingol, and Melian is his queen, and they dwell in Mengroth, the Thousand Caves. Melian gave great power to Elwë, and when he returns, he looks like a Maiar. He has gray hair and whatever the Maiar look like. We don't totally know. And they brought about...
And he's taller, too, apparently. He becomes the tallest of the Quendi.
Mm.
The elves.
And their children are the fairest of all the children of Iluvatar. They found the kingdom of... Is it Doriath?
I don't know. I didn't have that. No.
So, essentially, they become the Grey Elves in the forested region of...
Sindar is what they're called.
In the forested... They're called many things. I think the Doriath something is part of it, but that's okay. So they become the Grey Elves in the forested region of Beleriand. So that's kind of, they have to stop and give this story because it will help the rest of it's
a lot of world building here.
Yeah, it kind of helps you understand why some Teleri stayed, some went with Olwe, that kind of thing. So it was a very quick chapter, but they will refer back to it actually in chapter 5 when we get into that. So that ends chapter 4, where we had to take a little bit of a break to hear about a kind of a creepy love story. And then it kind of takes us on into chapter 5. Chapter 5 is called Of Eldamar and the Princes of the Eldalië. Is that how you would say that?
Yes.
And it describes the journey of the Eldar to Aman and how the different elves, the different hosts of elves split up into different factions, continue to split up into different factions after this. So that is chapter 4. Did you have anything you wanted to?
Other than it kind of reminded me of I think there's a story I think it's the Odyssey, where there's I should know this. Most of you guys will probably already know this. Basically, there's I think it's a siren, and Odysseus wants to hear her song, but every time a sailor hears her, they just crash the ships because they're
scared.
Well, it's such an enchanting sound. So they just chase her, but she's very deadly. So some of that spellboundness reminded me of this relationship that we just talked about here. So
I like that
Tolkien,
connection.
I think Tolkien might have grabbed a little from Greek
mythology
on that.
Yeah, I like that connection. Yeah, so chapter 5, we're back where we ended in chapter 3, where all the elves are kind of on the coast of the Great Sea, and they are afraid. They're hanging out with Ulmo, and they don't, they're too scared to cross alone. And so Ulmo comes to Beleriand to talk to them, and he plays some music. And he actually, I thought this was brilliant. He uproots an island with many of his helpers and his strength, and uses it as a ship to carry the Eldar to Valinor. Now, the Eldar that are there right now are the Vanyar and the Noldor. The Teleri are pretty far north, and they hear Ulmo's cry too late. And so they don't make it onto this first trip into Valinor. They are left with Asa, and Asa and Uinen teach them sea lore. So they eventually are just, and I'm sure that's another hundreds and thousands of years where they are just with Asa and Uinen. Eventually, Ulmo does return, and he brings them to Valinor in the same way that he brought the other Eldar on an island. Those who remain with Asa are called the Falathrim. So this is another faction of elves. They stay with Asa. They're led by Círdan, and they are the first shipmakers of Middle-earth. Círdan.
Yeah.
Do you have any input on that first trip to Valinor?
No, it's just kind of crazy how many more Sundrades there are of these elves. Teleri particularly just keep breaking off and off and off. But I think that's kind of cute's maybe the wrong word, but of the Falathrim, how they're like, we just want. They're the ones that really wanted to see Elwë, right? Or am I?
Yes,
is that wrong?
yes. I haven't gotten into all of that, but yeah.
Yeah, they're like, we really, their hearts were to get to Valinor, but they're like, we don't want to leave Elwë behind. So a whole faction of elves comes up out of that.
Actually, I think the Falathrim, led by Círdan, they are staying with Asa, and then the Friends of Elwë, who are unwilling to leave Valinor without him, are called the Eglath.
Oh, yep,
I'm
seeing that now. So
and they just wander around Valinor for a while, and they do eventually get to see Elwë when he awakens from his trance. And like we said, he appears very tall and gray and looks very much like a Maiar. And though he wants to see Valinor's trees again, he's actually very content because he can see that same light that he saw when he was in Valinor. He can see that light in his wife, essentially, in Melian. And so he's content to stay in Middle-earth still.
And quick note on Círdan the Shipwright, he ends up being one of the ones that holds one of the 3 rings of power later on. So just name drop there. He ends up he's pretty powerful.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. So the Teleri, they're still on this little island trying to make their way to Valinor, and Asa calls out to them, and that's what happens.
Yeah.
Right?
So little backstory. Asa, when Ulme goes over and is talking to the Valar, what do we do? Umu goes over. Asa starts building a relationship with these folks, and they really grow quite fond of Asa and his wife Uinen. And so he's just teaching them songs and about the sea, and he's the Maya of Umo. If you don't remember that, he's the lesser form,
kind of like his servant.
Yeah. So anyway, Asa starts really to love these people, and they start to love him. And so anyway, they're on this journey, and Asa like,
hey, wait, stop!
Come back!
So the Teleri actually listen to them and listen to Asa and beg Ulmo to stop this island, and he does. So they actually still are not going to make it to Valinor yet. They're on this island. He puts it down in the Bay of Eldamar, and the Teleri stay there. They're in sight of Valinor, but they're still under the stars.
They got like 90% there, and then they're like, hold up.
I wish they would tell us how long this time was to actually get the Teleri. Some of the Teleri, half of them are all around Middle-earth right now, to actually get there. But what I found interesting, it says that, and it talks about this later in the chapter too, that they stayed in sight of the stars. Are there no stars in Valinor?
I don't remember. I don't know.
It's a good. I just thought it was interesting, and I'll talk about that in a second too, because it mentions it again. It becomes known as Tol Eressëa, or the Lonely Isle. So I think that the Lonely Isle comes up in further on in Tolkien's stories. The Valar, and it mentions specifically the Valar and Finwë are really upset that they don't make it all the way to the Valinor. Finwë's friend was Elwë, so he's also really sad that they can't find Elwë, and well, not that they can't find him, because I think they did find him there, but he was left behind in Beleriand. So the Valar create a gap in the mountains, but I thought this was so nice. They create a gap in the mountains so that the Vanyar and the Noldor can see the stars. So they had to create. I don't think there are stars in Aman.
I thought it was to see the trees of light.
It says so they can see the stars, and so the light of the trees can touch the Lonely Isle. So they
Okay.
open the mountain so that, the Teleri, not quite in Valinor, but they want them to be able to see the light of the trees. And so they open. I don't know if you remember when they talked about creating Aman, they surrounded that island with mountains called the Pelori, and so they opened those mountains just a little bit so that the Vanyar and the Noldor could see the stars, and that the Teleri could see the trees of light.
So it went both ways. They opened.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
I did not catch that. Okay, so because they call it the path of light, and so that they created there, and so that makes sense. That you can see the starlight, and then you can see the tree light.
Yeah, I thought that was nice. So, the elves are in Valinor now. They build a city called Tirion, and Yavanna wants them to have a tree of light, but obviously it's not going to be as powerful. So she does create a tree in the image of Telperion, and a seed from that tree is also planted on the Lonely Isle. So once again, I see the Valar like giving them a little bit, just being nice. It's like, here's a tree on this Lonely Isle, even though you didn't make it all the way to Valinor. And that tree is named Celeborn, and the seed from Celeborn later becomes the white tree of Numenor. So that's a pretty cool connection there. And it quickly says, while quarrying for stone to build Finwë's house, masons discover the first gems, and the Noldor begin to cut and distribute them. So it starts mentioning gems, which, I mean, the name of the book, Silmarillion, literally means gems, and our podcast, A Couple of Silmarils. So the gems are being talked about. And then it quickly goes into some of Finwë's genealogy. So I was just going to kind of name them. And then after I name them, Ethan will point out anyone who he thinks would be an important connection. One of them you will definitely recognize. The rest, maybe not. So Finwë, the leader of the Noldor.
And real quick, before you start, I think the reason they go so much into this is because, as you said, the Noldor. Tolkien says these are going to be important throughout the rest of this book. So he's really building out these names here. So anyway.
Okay, so Finwë has 3 sons, Feanor, Fingolfin, and Finarfin. Feanor has 7 sons. Fingolfin has 2 sons and a daughter. And then Finarfin has, I think, 4 or 5 sons. 4? I think it says, if I can count, it's 4 sons and a daughter. And that daughter's name is Galadriel, whose hair is as golden as Laurelyn's light. And Laurelyn's one of the Tree of Light, so that's why they mentioned that. So I think they thought it would be important to mention Finwë and his genealogy, because it takes us to Galadriel, but I'm sure there's a lot of these other grandsons and daughters of Finwë that will become important in the stories as well. One was mentioned, Finrod. He actually helped build Minas Tirith, so that's cool. So, Ethan, did you have any other connections of Finwë's kids or his grandkids?
There is one Turin, Lord of he becomes Lord of Gondolin, that I noticed. I think there's going to be a lot more to come. Gondolin, I know, ends up becoming a pretty powerful city in Silmarillion. So definitely going to have a big part to play. I think the biggest thing to remember here is that as we go through the Silmarillion, what's very confusing is a lot of the lineage. I believe a lot of this is going to end with Finwë now, for the Quendi, at least for the elves. So to know to know Finwë, let's see, Feanor, Fingolfin, and Finarfin. We are actually told earlier on, I think maybe in the Eldalî, that Feanor is the one that creates the Silmarils. So he's obviously going to be big. But to remember those Finwë, and then you have the 3 sons, Feanor, Fingolfin, and Finarfin. That's going to be the start of the rest of the family tree. And so they brought up, I don't know, what did you say, 15 or so descendants
The
there.
grandkids of Finwë, essentially.
Yeah, grandchildren of Finwë, including Galadriel. So that's where the first active member of Lord of the Rings is. She's two generations. She's the third generation removed from the first of the elves, if you will. So that's helpful to put in the context. So I didn't go through and I don't have anything on everyone else yet, but I think we're gonna, as we hear new names, we need to just connect how they go up to Finwë.
Yeah, a lot of them will be Noldor. Yeah, I was looking up a few, and I don't remember which one, but Arwen is a descendant of one of these. So we'll get there eventually, but we weren't going to go through every name, and that would probably take us forever. And we kind of want to find out stuff together. So like if you're reading the Silmarillion, we're reading at the same time. We don't know. We don't want to spoil anything. We don't know what's happening either. So kind of figuring it out together, which is fun. So eventually, Asa teaches the Teleri that are on the Lonely Isle how to make ships. And so they do end up finally, after who knows how many years, making it to Valinor and reuniting with the other Eldar. So that's exciting, finally. They do build their own city. I think it's interesting. The city's named Alqualondë. It's on the shores of Valinor. I just find that so interesting that they make it to Valinor, but they're not going very far in. They're right there on the shores. It just shows their uneasiness or their wariness of actually making it to Valinor.
I do believe a lot of them end up really liking the sea as well through Olmu and Asa.
Yes, and the shipbuilding. They were called shipbuilders. Yeah. So they're living on the coast. The Vanyar, they decide to go further into Valinor or into Aman, actually, and they live near Manwë's Mountain, or for even further inland. Kind of, they mention out of sight of Middle Earth, so it's kind of like the Vanyar don't really want to remember anything of Middle Earth, and they just stay in Aman. The Noldor, however, they cannot forget Middle Earth, and it mentions that Feanor and his sons, they explore Valinor. And they don't really live in one place for very long. They're exploring all the different creatures and beasts. The book mentions that all the creatures and beasts in Aman are also in Middle Earth. There are some in Aman that never make it to Middle Earth, so there are some creatures that would be different, but everything that's in Middle Earth is also in Aman.
I think some of Melkor's beasts are not.
Oh yeah, they do. Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
They do mention the evil creatures of Melkor, that they were obviously not going to be in Aman because there's really no evil in Aman. So, yeah, that kind of ends the chapter 5, just kind of continuing into the elves and their journey to Valinor, and kind of the end of it, sort of. They've all of the elves that are going to make it to Valinor, I believe, have made it on their journey. So that is what I had. Did you have some input?
No. I think that's everything I had for the chapter. I think it's. I hope you're enjoying it. Hope you bear in there with us as we're trying to go through and learn all these names. And I think we're correcting ourselves as we hear more, as we go through more of just where to get to. But right now we're just trying to build that framework and slowly think about who's this person and whatnot. So I think that's what I try to get mostly out of this chapter. Is Finwë, Feanor, Fingolfin, and Finarfin are going to be key characters as we go down throughout the next several chapters. So I just the biggest thing that I had in this chapter, just understanding, was it seems like a lot of this is about the relationship that Valar have with the children of Ilúvatar, particularly the elves. They haven't mentioned the men once yet.
Yeah, so, I'm interested to know when that
comes in. Hasn't happened yet. So, but this is like how do the gods, if you will, relate to mankind or elf kind and whatnot, the non-gods. And so it's very interesting to see how they're trying to build that relationship. They're really enthralled by them. They know they're more powerful than them. They're trying to lead them over to Valinor, but they're not forcing them over. It's very interesting how that relationship is getting built.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they talked about that in some of the first chapters. How they're not their masters. They're more their mentors or their guides, and so that is shown where they're not like, you must come to Valinor, and they don't force them, obviously, because it took them forever to get there. So yeah, I have a couple questions for you.
Okay, go ahead.
I thought this one was a good one. Do you think the elves are happier in Middle Earth or in Valinor?
I think they're happier in Valinor. Yeah, I think as they it's still, even the ones that um, are in Middle Earth, there's still a common theme of sailing to the Undying Lands, because that's really where it's all at. So I think happier in Valinor.
Do you think they regret, the ones that stayed in Middle Earth regret staying there?
I don't think they know.
They don't know to regret?
They don't know. Yeah, I don't think they know enough to regret. I don't think they that Valinor, they haven't seen Valinor, and the only one that has is Elwë, but he has the light of Valinor in his Maya wife, Maiar wife. No, Maya is the singular.
In Melian, yeah.
Melian. So.
Yeah, I guess I think Iluvatar gave them different personalities, and I think like the Vanyar definitely, like, they were meant to be in Valinor. But I feel like the Teleri were just so wary of being there that while again there's beauty and it's like heaven there probably, but I think there's part of Middle Earth that they miss.
Okay.
That's my theory. Does knowing the origin of the elves and their travel to Valinor change the way you see the elves in Lord of the Rings, like Elrond, Galadriel, Legolas?
I don't think it's changed the way I see them, but it helps give me a context for it, particularly the Eldar, who the Eldar are, and that's constant. I'm going to be, as I rewatch Lord of the Rings and things of that nature, those names are going to mean a lot more to me now, because I remember they talk about Elbereth, who is Varda, the maker of the stars, and so I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense, and then so I guess it helps me put in context. I don't think it's changed the way I thought about them yet, but maybe as we learn more about where these sunderings and these factions end up, that might help me. Like, okay, your parents didn't quite finish the journey to Valinor; they really wanted to stay here, and then they kind of went off that way.
Yeah. I guess it doesn't change too much for me either, except that they take forever to do anything. So I thought that was interesting. Like, Elrond didn't want to be a part of the war. Just things like the decision making and things kind of make a little bit of sense. But I do just love hearing the background. And we watch Lord of the Rings every Christmas time, and so Christmas time is coming up. So I am excited as we are going through the Silmarillion to get through that and watch that. And maybe we'll bring things from when we watch it to the podcast a little bit, like, oh, we heard this name when we watched it this week. So that's exciting. Did you have anything else to end?
No, I guess nothing particular, though. I was just thinking, it's interesting. I don't know if there's analogies and contrasts that can be made of going towards a goal of like ultimate good and stopping short, and just thinking of the different sunderings of the elves and those that heeded the call, and those that did not,
Because of their fear.
because it really seems like a lot of because of fear. And what analogies you would make to things in life like that, where you're just scared to go all the way, even though you know it's what's best for you. And I don't have a solid analogy right now, but just I was contemplating that, of how the elves were like, hey, this is the best place to go, and then as they go on, oh, I like this, I got distracted by this, I changed my mind here. I don't know, something to ponder.
I like it. All right. What chapters are we reading next week?
So I was looking through that here. So we're going to look at, it seems like probably, once again, the 15 to 17 pages gives us about as much content as we want to go through in a week. So that would be, we're going to lead chapters 5 or 6, 7, and 8, I believe is what we will end up reading. So
yeah, the next 3 chapters. And the names of them are?
Fëanor and the Unchaining of Melkor. That doesn't sound good.
No.
Of the Silmarils and the Unrest of the Noldor. And then of the Darkening of Valinor.
Those sound very sad.
They do.
But
they do.
Yeah, we did feel like in these the 3 chapters we went over today, it was the start of like, okay, yeah, this book is gonna take some time to get through, and we had to read over a lot more. I feel like this time to really understand and connect all the connections that were happening in those 3 chapters. So probably will continue as we can keep going. But for now, that's all we had. So yeah, that's it.
A Couple of Silmarils out.